Welcome back to Her Birth, Her Story, where we share real birth experiences. I'm Brooke, your host, and on today's episode, we sit down with Lindsay, who is a mom of 3, and she is also a birth educator and a lactation specialist. We really dive into her 3 very different birth stories, and something that is so cool about her 3 birth stories is that they all happened within a year apart. So she had one birth in 2023, one in 2024, and her 3rd one in 2025. And we just dive into all of the things. Induction. We even get into how her perspective changed some, especially with needing an induction with her first, and epidurals, and the difference between when an epidural is done poorly and when an epidural is done correctly, and how much of a big difference that makes. We also dive into the importance of advocating for yourself and making your birth space your own. So please join me as we hold space for Lindsay and her stories. Hey, Lindsay, thanks so much for coming on Her Birth, Her Story. Can you go ahead and start by introducing yourself to us?
Yeah, thanks for having me. My name's Lindsay Flume. I am a wife to my husband, Chris. We have been married for 5 years this year, and we have 3 babies, and they're all year apart. So we have December 2023, 2024, and 2025. So December is very busy in our household, and they're super fun. They're 2.5, 1.5, and half is what I have right now. So it's a full house and it's a lot of fun. I'm also a childbirth educator and lactation specialist on the side whenever it works for my schedule and family, but it's one of my passions, talking to women and their birth partners as they get ready for birth, and then also after with lactation and their feeding journey. So that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's awesome. Honestly, before we go ahead and start with your birth stories, can you just kind of give us like a little bit of background of how you viewed pregnancy, birth before even getting pregnant yourself?
Yeah. I always just thought you get pregnant and you go to the hospital and you have a baby. I never knew that there were so many different interventions, options, whether you have it at the hospital or you have a home birth or birth center. My mom did a really good job educating me on that because she had my sister at a birth center and then she had the rest of us at hospitals. And I'm the youngest and I'm getting close to 40. So she is, this was a long time ago. No offense, Mom. But she did a really good job sharing her experience. And so I always knew it wasn't like the movies where you're screaming and, your water breaks in a parking lot and you rush to the hospital and have a baby in 2 hours. Wouldn't that be nice? But so yeah, I went in with that kind of knowledge and expectation, but I didn't know the many facets of birth. Pregnancy, I knew nothing. I just knew I couldn't have wine or deli meat and that I was going to be miserable and a whale at the end of it. That's all I thought, which is funny because that wasn't my experience with pregnancy either. But yeah, that's pretty much what I knew. And wow, was it all completely different.
Yeah. So then did you already go in thinking that you wanted to definitely have a hospital birth and definitely wanted to kind of go more of that route? Or were you kind of open to maybe wanting to explore all of your options?
Yeah. So I had 3 hospital births. I definitely read a ton of books and did a ton of just self-education on home births. I was very open to it. I have always kind of been someone who if I have a headache, I'm not going to take Advil. I'm just going to deal with it. I lived overseas for 7 years. And so I didn't really have access to a lot of medicine. So I was very much so you have the thing so that you can do it, again, better. I kind of just had that mentality of sickness and of which pregnancy is not sickness, but of any type of medical anything. So I thought, I'm going to have a home birth, or if I do go to the hospital, I'm going to have, no epidural. And I just want to I want to experience it. And, with getting pregnant, I ended up discovering I had some thyroid issues and, I was definitely on the riskier side.
Yeah.
Risk.
Yeah.
For the medical world. And so for me, I just felt more confident in a hospital setting, actually. So I decided to do that with my first. So I was open to it and I totally love it and I'm all about it. My hospital that I deliver in has the tubs and the essential oils. So it's like what I call a crunchy hospital. They cater to the crunchy is how
Yeah.
I say it.
No, that's awesome. And that's
Yeah.
awesome that they give like those options as well, because
Mhm.
that's the other thing that I always encourage moms, even when you're like looking into hospital births as well, like you should see all of the things that they do offer, because that is exactly why for my first, I switched hospitals after
Mhm.
my 12-week appointment, because I was like, no, I know that if I'm going to do it in the hospital, I really want to be able to labor in the tub, and I really want
Yeah.
somebody who's hands off. Like that's just what I want. And so that's why I always say too, like it's not always a one size fits all. Just because it's the hospital that's closest to you does not mean that that's always the best option for you.
Absolutely.
But no, I think that's awesome. So that kind of like leads us into your first birth story. So go ahead
Yeah.
and just kind of either set the stage for us, give us any background information that we need, and go ahead and jump into the story.
Yeah. Yeah. So with my first, it took us like a year and a half to get pregnant. We did have a chemical pregnancy 4 months into marriage. We just were very much so we're getting married and we're having babies. Like we were kind of on that trajectory. So had a chemical early and I was like, that kind of made me want to go to the doctor and just make sure everything was okay levels wise. Then they discovered that my thyroid was pretty out of whack, which was not very surprising to me because I have a sister who had thyroid cancer actually in her 30s. And so I kind of was like aware of that. So once I got my thyroid on track and I went through a bunch of fertility testing and, because I'm thinking I'm never going to have babies, which looking at that season, I'm like, wow, Lindsay, like, you just needed to be a little patient because obviously I can have babies. I had 3 back to back to back. But, you get in your head a little bit in those seasons of waiting. Once I got my thyroid figured out, and then they found like some uterine polyps on my uterus. And so got that removed surgically. And then literally the next month got pregnant. And so we were just thrilled, over the moon, answered a prayer, so excited, did all the things, the big gender reveal, the huge baby shower. Like it was just so fun. And it was such a like moment of, anticipation. Then as I got closer to 37 weeks, I had high blood pressure, which also runs in my family. Yeah.
Crazy.
But I only ever have high blood pressure when I'm pregnant with girls and third trimester. So the only time I've ever had high blood pressure in my life is pregnant with a girl, third trimester. So then my doctor was like, we're going to schedule your induction for 38 weeks. And I was like, excuse me? Because I have high blood pressure, I have to like be induced? Like, what? And so all my like reading and education I did for myself of unmedicated, natural hospital birth kind of like flew out the window really fast. So I'm like, okay, I guess, I asked pros and cons. So that's something I will talk about throughout this whole thing is making sure that you advocate for yourself in a doctor's office, in a hospital, in a lactation consultant, meeting, wherever you are. You have full permission to ask any and all questions. And so for me, I always ask whenever they want to like, not require, but whenever they're pushing something on me, I ask why, what are my alternatives? What are the pros and cons of doing this? Don't be afraid to ask. I think a lot of people get intimidated in, a doctor type setting and they don't want to like pry and they're just like, okay, I'll get induced. And they're, shaking in their boots. So she told me the pros and cons of going past 38 weeks with high blood pressure. And I thought that the cons outweighed the pros. So I decided to go ahead with the induction. I had a doula with my first birth, which was great because I was like, my husband and I, it's our first time doing all this. And I'm definitely the type A personality in our marriage. And I'm definitely like the vocal I'm definitely sassier. He's definitely a lot nicer than I am. And so I kind of wanted someone if ish hit the fan, I needed someone to vocalize what I was feeling. Not that my husband wouldn't do that. He would do anything I asked him.
Yeah.
But I just knew he would be in that moment with me too. So had a doula. She was very crunchy and I loved her for that because I'm a good balance, like I had an epidural all 3 times. I'll spoil it there. But so it was nice to have her input in a hospital setting. And she had 8 children and, she's been a doula for like 25 plus years. Like she had so much experience. So with her and the induction, it was like, okay, I feel confident going into it. And I'm still going to try and do unmedicated, but also I have no idea what it's like to have a contraction, let alone a Pitocin contraction. So, open arms. So I went in, got induced, and there were things that I learned about induction because, again, I asked a ton of questions, and I also took the birth class at the hospital, which I really recommend if you're taking, if you're going to go to a certain hospital, is like take their birth class. Usually it's free or very affordable. And I would take that on top of like a private birth class as well, because they're going to tell you what they do at the hospital, which is good to know. Because if you do get induced, you want to know what they do, like what, because every hospital is different in their go-to, means of intervention and pain medication.
Yeah.
So I'm glad I took that. And then also I had my doula who offered birth education classes. And so she just like did a semi-private with another couple who I ended up becoming like best friends with. And I'm still friends with her today.
That's awesome.
And I'm glad because I got the crunchy version and like, the more both sides, the neutral version. And then the hospital, this is what we do in a hospital. So I knew that I did not want a Foley balloon, which I'm not going to explain it right now, but you can look it up. But I did not want that intervention done. So I knew going in, I want, Cytotec, which is a pill that softens your cervix. I wanted that. And then I just wanted to go straight on a Pitocin. I had my plan. And, when it comes to stuff that doesn't endanger you or your child, you 100% have control of that schedule. So I'd rather do 3 rounds of Cytotec instead of do 1 round and then stick the Foley balloon, in my uterus. I'm not doing that because I just personally didn't want to do it. I heard horror stories about it. I don't like pressure on my cervix. I knew that from my fertility testing that wasn't a good experience. So to me, I was like, I ain't doing it. And you can't make me because I'm in control here. Now, if it involves like, your baby's heart rate dropping and you have to do something, that's a totally different thing that you're not advocating against. This is just my, my birth and my preferences. So they kind of know me at this hospital as someone who will not do the Foley. They're like, here comes Lindsay. She's going to do 3 rounds of Cytotec again. And so after laboring on Pitocin for 6 hours without an epidural, I remember I went into the restroom and I was like, who am I trying to impress here? Like, my husband doesn't care if anything, he wants me to get the epidural right now. Like, they're not going to give me a trophy for going unmedicated. Like, these Pitocin contractions are psycho. They're on top of each other. Like, I was just exhausted because inductions just take a long time and you're laboring for a long time when it's your first, usually, not everybody's different. Everybody, I just got induced with my 3rd and it was like the quickest, easiest thing in my life. So every birth is different. I'll tell you that. So with my first, I came out and I was like, I want that epidural. And my husband's like, thank you, Jesus. Like, we're doing it. Like, I just want to be able to like breathe and relax. And so get the epidural. And I'm like, it's not working. And so it only worked on one side of my body. So they're like flipping me like a pancake, trying to get it to distribute. And meanwhile, the resident at the hospital is like barking, like, you need to let me break your water. You need to let me break your water. And I'm like, you cannot break my water until I get the epidural figured out, because I know when you break my water, it's going to be more painful. And I just was exhausted at that point. So finally they figure out my epidural. They probably spinal tapped me at this point because I don't remember feeling anything. Like, and now that I've had 3 epidurals, I look at that first one and I'm like, that sucker was strong. Because with my other 2, I could feel the pressure, like in a great way. I knew where baby was. I knew, if pushing was successful. Like when an epidural is administered and done correctly, it's really great, love it.
Yeah.
So then with my first, her heart rate started to drop which I don't know if that's actually true. I think they just had a hard time finding it because I was like flipping around so much. And they wanted to, again, do another intervention, which was like stick a heart rate monitor on her head to like, to hear her heart rate. And that was like our only hard no. Like, you can do whatever you want to me. Like, you can stick an internal monitor inside me, but like not on baby's head. Like, we're not doing that. So they're like, man, this girl's being really stubborn. And there was a funny moment with the resident where like she was talking to the nurse and I could hear her. And I like called her out in front of everyone. I'm like, you don't have to talk about me to her. You can just like say to my face, like, I'm not letting you break my water. Like I totally called her out. And then I asked for a new resident because I'm in charge. Like that's the thing is like, there's always another nurse and there's always another resident. And if you don't like someone's attitude or their bedside manner, like you are not a sick patient. Like you are a pregnant mom about to bring forth life and you're in complete control of your space and that hospital works for you. So, I'm paying obviously with insurance, it's not 30K, but I'm paying the money to be here. So if you have a bad attitude, like, sorry, you got to go because this is a sacred space and you're really screwing it up.
Yeah.
And so had a couple of those moments, which was funny. And I love this hospital. I've delivered there 3 times. So it was just an off day and that's okay, but get out of my birth space. And so then the doctor came in who I was seeing. It wasn't a resident anymore. And they're like, all right, so we need to get this baby out. So if you're not dilated, we need to have a C-section. And if you are dilated, you can push. And I was like, great. And so they were like, how do you feel about that? And I was like, I've known since before I even met my husband that I don't want a C-section. So like, I didn't come in here wanting that after I've been laboring for like 24 hours. So yeah, no. And they were like, okay, well, let's check you. And I'm like, please, dear Jesus, let me be dilated. And they're like, you're dilated. We can push. And I'm like, great, let's do it. And so they used a vacuum to help with the pushing because they're like, she's so spinal tapped up. Like she's gotta need help. And so they talked me through it and she came out in like 15 minutes. It was very fast. And I don't remember feeling anything because I was so epiduraled up and it was awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, I had my baby and I didn't give a rip about anything that happened before because I had her. So that was my first birth, which is like hilarious to hear say out loud. And then I got pregnant so fast after that because a lot of people are like, that sounds really intense. And I'm like, it really wasn't. Like,
Yeah.
I know I had almost every intervention under the sun, but it was an amazing experience. And I love giving birth. And it wasn't any bit negative or traumatic for me. It was
That's
just
good.
like, I have to manage a couple adult emotions here that aren't my own with the hospital staff.
Yeah. No, for sure.
But yeah, so that was Faye. That was baby number 1.
So like looking back, were there moments where your intuition was like telling you something that you didn't really feel confident in speaking up about?
Maybe. I feel like I'm probably the exception where like I probably speak up a little too much sometimes and I come off a little, I think I told one of the residents, I was like, I'm a nice Christian lady. And like, you're making me be really mean right now. I was like, why are you making me be so mean?
Yeah.
Like, I'm just telling you, this is what I want and this is what we're doing. So yeah, I don't know if I had a moment where I didn't speak up, but there was definitely like a part of me that was like, I feel like we're doing too many interventions. And so I just felt like I was like fighting. And my intuition was just like, we've done enough. We've done enough intervention to get to where we are. Like, we just need to like wait, why can't we just wait a little bit? Like, why are we in such a hurry, friends? And yeah, so I'd say advocating for myself, like to have time. It's like, okay, like I just need a moment. And that's another thing that I always stress to people is like, you have full permission to like kick everyone out of your room and nicely say, can I have a moment alone with my partner and like to discuss this? Like when they were breaking the water, I was like, can I have a moment alone? Because I didn't want to discuss it in front of nurses or doctors or whatever. Yeah. And so that way my doula, my husband and I got to discuss like pros and cons and like my doula like would say to me straight, like, I personally wouldn't do this, but like, it's totally up to you. And she was very much so like, I personally wouldn't let them break my water. And I was like, I feel like I need to have them break my water. Like that would probably be the answer to your question. It's like the intuitive moment actually was an intervention, which sounds strange, but it was. And then like, once they broke my water, I dilated. And now that I've had 3 babies and they've all been 5 to 6 pounds, I know that like, I usually have to get my water broken. So yeah, I would say that's an intuitive moment was having them break my water, but also advocating that I didn't want it broken until they fixed my epidural.
Yeah. No, for sure. And so what do you think what did that experience teach you just about advocacy for like all of
Yeah.
your pregnancies?
Yeah. So, I mean, it was just a moment where I'm like, okay, like, yeah, you do have to advocate for yourself if you're in a hospital setting. And I completely understand that they are like just doing their job. So like I don't hold it personally against any nurse or doctor or whatever. I also know everyone has bad days. So like
For
maybe you
sure.
had a rough day, you
Yeah.
know? Like
Yeah.
I'm not going to hold this against you the rest of your life. But I do know what I will not budge on. Like there are certain things I will not budge on intervention wise or, attitude or the way you talk to me wise. And so I think it just taught me that like I am in control of that birth space. Like I get to say like who is in it and who's not. And I can ask for a new nurse. I can ask for a different resident. I can ask for, like I never let men, not work on me, but like be near me unless you're my husband. So like I set that tone right out the bat, like no men in the room unless you're my husband. And so yeah, just knowing that you're in control. And that's why education is like a priority and a passion of mine because like if you don't know what a Foley balloon is, you're not going to know that you don't want it. Or if you don't know the side effects of an epidural, you may want it or you may not because you need to know, pros and cons, risks, alternatives, all these different things. There's this acronym I always teach, which is BRAINS, BRAINS, and B is, I wrote it down just in case. Benefits is the first one. So B for benefits. R is for risks. So like, what are my risks if I do this? And what are my risks if I don't do this? Alternatives is, is there another alternative besides epidural? Is there another alternative for pain relief? Is an example. And then I is intuition. So like, what's your intuition telling you? And N is nothing. Like maybe you just want to say no or nothing and, maybe give me some space to think about this before I make a decision. And then S is smile because you can always be assertive and nice with a smile. You can kick someone out of your room with a smile and be nice about it and do it tactfully. So that's something I always preach to people is like, the brain, benefits, risks, alternatives, intuition, and no, and
It's
smile.
awesome. Yeah. No, that's
Yeah.
that's great. I think that's some really good practical advice too for just moms, no matter where they're choosing to birth to, and just like learning
Yeah.
about all of the things too, and just I don't know. I think that's really great. So thanks for sharing that. So
Yeah.
now let's just go ahead and jump right into your second.
Yeah. My boy, my Lyle James. His pregnancy was the easiest and his birth was the easiest.
That's
But now
awesome.
he's a wild child. I'm like, wow, his birth and pregnancy is so chill, but there's zero chill about that boy now that he's 2. No, he's amazing. So with Lyle, I got pregnant really fast after Faye and I was shocked. But we were expecting not, I go into this thinking it's going to be hard for me to get pregnant. And then I have a baby, then I have another one. So you think I would learn by now. It's not that hard for me to get pregnant. So my son, Lyle, he came naturally at 36 weeks and 5 days. And they tell you that if you have kids back to back, that you usually go earlier, which I didn't know. Fun fact. And my daughter was a chunk. Like she was 30 pounds at that time, 12 months old, 30 pounds, the chubbiest Gerber baby you ever did see. And
Wow.
I really think like just lifting her, like put me into labor
That's crazy.
because I was just walking around Home Goods with my mom and I was like, I feel like I could give birth today. And
Yeah.
literally I did. It was wild. My mom was like, wow, you're so prophetic, Lindsay. But
Crazy.
go into the hospital and, I time my contractions, the 3-1-1 rule or 5-1-1 where you have 5 minutes apart, each contraction lasting a minute for an hour. 5-1-1 is for your first birth. Second onward is 3-1-1, where it's 3 minutes apart, lasting a minute for an hour total. And so, I'm timing it and I'm like, okay, it's time to go to the hospital. So we go to the hospital and my contractions like stall at the hospital. And they're, I'm just in triage hanging out and they're just like, it's only been like, now they're like 7 minutes apart, then they're 8 minutes apart. And It even got up to like 15 minutes apart. And so they're like, we're just going to like send you home. And we were kind of like, no, we're going to just like go walk around downstairs or, go get breakfast. It was like 4 a.m. So we were going to do that. And then I went to the restroom and I was bleeding and I was like, okay, now that I'm bleeding, like I'm not going anywhere. You guys are stuck with me. And so then they admit me and they're like, because at 36 and 5, they want to keep you pregnant until you're 37 weeks, which like to me is hilarious because your due date can totally be off. And so it's like, I hate to break it to you guys, but like I'm having a baby. So like you better start acting like it. And so then my doctor comes in, which I love her. She was like, okay, we're gonna have a baby. And I'm like, yeah, I've been trying to tell you guys. And so then we're kind of just hanging out. No interventions are happening at all. And then all of a sudden I like go into labor, like hardcore, like 3 minutes apart, like fast. And it went fast. And I remember being like, I better get that epidural before it's too late. And so I was like, I want the epidural. And I remember the person who did my first epidural, and because I didn't want them to do it again. And they probably were still there because it was a year ago, but it was a new person and they did the best epidural job. They were amazing. And I had the best birth experience because I got the epidural, took an hour-long nap. I woke up and they're like, you're dilated. You can push. And I'm like, sounds great. And I pushed him out in literally like 2 minutes. It was crazy. And he was my biggest baby, which was 6 pounds, 6 ounces, which is not that big.
Wow. Yeah.
But they did have to break my water again. And I was very okay with that. They're like, do you mind if we break your water? And I'm like, go for it, honey. Because I know that once you break my water, I'm going to have a baby.
Yeah.
And
for sure.
so she broke my water. And then I took the nap. And then I woke up and pushed. And that was it. So uneventful. So amazing.
That's awesome. Yeah. And did your son have to have any like of a NICU stay or anything for being so early, or was everything like
Nope.
great?
He was my biggest baby. That's the funniest part.
That is crazy.
They did have like everyone there. Like, they had like the NICU staff. And that's another thing is like, I didn't mention that in my first birth, but it is a funny story that I tell people because I was always told like, you don't want a lot of people in your room, which like I understand like the privacy and stuff like that. But in my first birth, I had so many people in my room because it was like, lots of interventions going on and she was technically early and I was induced and they were using a vacuum and it's like a teaching hospital. And at first you would like think that sounds terrible, but I actually like loved it. I think it was the extrovert in me. I felt like I had just like this wall of like a hype squad that was like so excited for me to push and have a baby. And so I actually like low key loved it.
That's awesome.
I was like, and I just remember this woman like being in my face, like teaching me how to push because I'm like, I can't feel anything.
Yeah.
But then with my second, the epidural was perfect and I could like feel everything. And it was an amazing experience.
Yeah.
And I just felt more present in that one for sure. But yeah, he did perfectly fine and my biggest baby yet.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I know sometimes they always talk about how they want to get to 37 weeks because of the lung surfactant or whatever too. I just didn't know if they tried to like put him in the NICU just because he was technically before that 37 weeks, as I've heard stories of they're not needing to be like in NICU stay, but because of just kind of the fear that they can stir up sometimes, I didn't know, but good thing that did not have to happen because that's
they for sure like tried. And they did like testing and they were like making sure everything was okay, which is fine. Like I want him to be okay.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, he I always tell people the Lord knows their birthday. So, he was due late December and he came 2 days before my daughter's first birthday. So I was like, he just wanted to make sure that I had Irish twins and he wanted to squeeze in there before her birthday.
That is so funny. Yeah, no, that's awesome. So how do you think that maybe your first experience or just more education before your second really changed your confidence going into this birth?
Yeah, I would say I was definitely like more at peace with advocating for myself. Like I knew that I was allowed to, if that makes sense. Like I was very confident in advocating and just like with, I tell people this in parenting. It's like the more kids you have, like the more confident you are as a parent because like you've just tried a bunch of things and you're also just like, everything's going to be okay. Like at the end of the day, I'm going to have a baby, and like that's the blessing at the end of the day. And how we get there can always be different and not how we plan. But like, I'm just more confident in the fact that like I'm going to have a baby at the
Yeah.
end of this,
Yeah, for sure.
And so I always tell people like have all the babies, parenting's the best. It's super fun, but also like giving birth is super fun and just like making sure that like you remember, not remember what you've learned, but like be open to like always learning. So like each birth I learn something new and I'm able to use that in the next birth or, to encourage a friend, stuff like that.
Yeah. And I think for this one thing that I really loved is I just feel like your motherly intuition just like really came out before even having this baby and being in like active labor, just because, I think it definitely takes power and confidence in being like, no, I'm having a baby. So we're going to go walk
Yeah.
around and I'm going to be right back here because guess what? We're having a baby.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of women out there that definitely would not, they would just kind of probably leave too.
Yeah.
So can you like speak to that intuition a little bit on either, what you were really like feeling as to why you knew it was going to happen or just kind of speaking to that intuition a little bit?
Yeah, I just knew. I was like, I've had contractions. I think I was like 3 or 4 centimeters already. Like
Wow.
I was dilating.
Yeah.
And I just was like, I'm not, I mean, it's only like a 25-minute drive to the hospital, but like, I'm not going home and I'm going to be very close by. Cause there's just something about it that was like, I don't just have contractions to like have contractions. Like I barely have Braxton Hicks usually, like not until my third did I have Braxton Hicks. So for me, like if contractions are happening, I know the difference between a real contraction versus Braxton Hicks. So for me, I was like, it's for sure happening. And I also am not going to like live my life the next 2 weeks in what is it called? Prodromal labor. I'm like, no, I will not be doing this. You will induce me if this does not pick up. And then like the minute I started bleeding, that's when I was like, I ain't going home. Like if there's blood, I'm staying here. And I didn't actually say this, but I did have like a 10% placental abruption with that birth.
Gotcha.
And so and that's why I really thought it was like picking up my daughter. I'm like, she's 30 freaking pounds. Like this girl's huge.
Yeah.
And
For sure.
I was very pregnant. And so, yeah, that's another thing is like advocating for yourself. Like if you're worried about bleeding, if you're worried about anything that you're feeling, like, I looked around and I was like, you guys have open rooms. I ain't going anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
You're
for
like,
sure.
okay.
Yeah. Well, and it's a good thing too. And honestly, like for me, if bleeding's happening anyways, they should probably want you to be there, especially like being that close.
The minute I told them like, oh, I just went to the restroom, there was blood. They're like, okay, we're going to admit you, So then from triage, I got to like go into a room type of thing.
Yeah. That's awesome. So let's jump into your most recent birth.
Yeah, I know. She's so cute. I'm obsessed with her. I get baby fever around this time of year, So I just am obsessed with her. And her birth was super fun. She's my daughter. And I get hypertension. I like knew it was coming. I'm like, this is my second daughter. And my pregnancy was exactly the same. I get like super sick during girl pregnancies. And with my boy, it was like easy as cake. And so I knew I was having a girl before I even like found out I was having a girl. And so that was fun. And then I was like, cool, I'm probably going to get hypertension around 35 weeks. And then I'm probably going to get induced at like 37 because I have like a history of preterm labor. Like I know what's going on in the medical world at this point.
Yeah.
And so lo and behold, 35 weeks rolls around and they're like, you're probably going to get induced. I'm like, yeah, I'm ready for it. Let's do it. Because your third pregnancy that close together, you're feeling large and in charge at the end of that bad boy. So I was all about it. I'm like, do it. Induce me. Let's have a baby. And I knew I was going to get that epidural. I already knew I was going to have interventions done. So I kind of just like embraced it. And that's something that like I don't teach, but I just personally am like, if you're going to have interventions, like because you have to, sometimes it's nice to embrace some of them that go with it. Like some people can labor on Pitocin and do completely unmedicated. You totally can. But also, like, no trophies are being handed out. Like, feel free to embrace, any type of pain medication if you need it, type of thing. So it's nice when you have intervention to embrace some, medical pain relief intervention as well. And so I get induced at 37 weeks. And so that's a little earlier than my 38-week girl. And I went in there and they're like, Lindsay doesn't want a Foley balloon. We know that. We see her coming. We know Lindsay. Everyone knows me. They're like, she just wants a bunch of Cytotec and then she's going to have a baby. And I'm like, yes, that's exactly right. So I had 3 rounds of Cytotec, which is 12 hours. So I always go in like at night so that I can just have Cytotec and sleep and then hopefully something happens. And I like going in at night. When you have other children, it's nice if you're being induced to go in after bedtime. So I always encourage people to do that. If you are getting induced and you have like toddlers or kids at home, it's nice because then you can like put them to bed and then you disappear, when they're not awake. And they're like, where are you going?
Yeah.
And so then I had 3 rounds of Cytotec. And after 2 rounds, they tried to get me to do the Foley again. They're like, come on, Lindsay, it's been like 8 hours and you're still a 1. I was like so discouraged. I'm like, dang, like with my son, I showed up 4 centimeters dilated. Like I was so discouraged. I was like, oh my gosh. And so then after I like got over my discouragement and remembered that you can dilate so flippin' fast, I did 1 more round of Cytotec and then it was like, boom, I went into active labor, did not need 1 drop of Pitocin and just went straight into labor and it was awesome. I labored for like 2 hours and got the epidural and then it was like, boom, let's push her out. And literally I pushed her out in 2 pushes, like 10 seconds. It was psycho. It was the easiest, the more you have, for me at least, it's gotten easier.
Okay, so at this point in with your like birth stories, all 3 of them, do you feel like you were truly in charge of this birth space more than maybe your other 2?
Yes, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean 3 kids in literally 3 years. It was kind of like 3 in 2 years almost. Yeah. I was for sure. My husband was a well-oiled machine at that point too. I mean, he knew where all the broth was and
Yep.
he knew what I was going to be, saying to the doctors and, we're always a team. So like having his support is huge. Even though I tend to be like more vocal, like I know that he is right there, saying amen to every barking order I have.
Yeah. No, I think it's great too, especially having someone, especially your husband, being that person too, because a lot of times you actually hear a lot of stories of husbands maybe just being a lot more hands off, not because they don't want to support, but just because they don't really know. And sometimes in the hospital, there's like kind of like a stigma or like I don't know, like sometimes the staff doesn't really include the husband as well too, to where it's just nice like hearing when there are husbands that, hey, they know what to do, they're here, they're advocating, they're helping. And I think that's great.
Well, and that's like a huge part of the education as well. Like, unless you're a single mom or like your husband's deployed, like I almost require the husband to be a part of if like I'm teaching a childbirth education class or doing like a consultation or something, because if he is not educated in the same way that you are, when people challenge you and you want to do something other than what they're challenging you in, he might side with them instead of you because like what they're saying makes a lot of sense. And he's like, well, why wouldn't you do that? And you're like, well, because A, B, and C. Like then you have to like explain yourself to your husband and to the medical staff, where it's like if your husband and you are on the same page before you go into birth, then it's just so much easier. And if you're like hopped up on epidural or anything else, your husband can advocate like, no, I know she doesn't want that done. Or no, we do not. Like when it came to my first birth and they wanted to put that heart rate monitor on Faye's head internally, my husband was like, no, because at that point I was pretty far gone when it came to like coherent.
Yeah.
And my husband's like, no way. Like we're not doing it because
Yeah.
we've already talked about it and we knew that that was something that they would probably want to push or ask. And so that's why like education is so important before going in, and why having your husband involved in it and not just like, you know,
For sure.
whatever. Same
Yeah.
with lactation too, because if they don't understand, like I think a lot of people think lactation is easy and breastfeeding is easy and natural and yada yada.
Yeah.
And men just usually aren't very educated on it because why would they be? And so having them along for that process as well will also help because they'll understand like the sacrifice, the, the effort and the emotion that goes into it. So I think it's so important to be like yoked to your partner in that sense with
For sure.
going into birth and after.
Oh, for sure. No, definitely. And especially just the support too that you need, honestly, pregnancy, during birth, and even postpartum too. That is very important.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give a mom who maybe feels intimidated by doctors or nurses, but really, really wants to advocate for herself respectfully during a hospital birth?
Yeah. I am just a big advocate of communicating honestly. You could even preface it that way to them like, hey, I don't want to come off, mean or entitled. And I don't want you to think that I don't trust you or believe you know what you're doing. But I'm just telling you that, like, this is what I feel is best for me. And this is my choice. Like, you can tactfully present yourself honestly,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes, the emotions are involved, but you
Yeah.
could always say you're sorry. I mean, you could always say like, "Oh, I'm so sorry I was snappy." And they're kind of used to that, they're used to women in labor.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I was snappy in that moment. I don't want you to like think that I'm doubting you or I don't trust you, but this is just like what I would like to do. And then you kind of have to just stand your ground. And you can like, I don't know, I'm savage because I'm thinking about this one time that a nurse was like trying to be like, well, like the Foley like gets you like it where like she was like trying to like give me all these facts and stuff. And I was like, honey, I know. Like you don't have to keep explaining it to me. I know what it can do for certain people, but like I don't want it and I'm not gonna get it. So you don't have to like try and passive aggressively like communicate that to me. Like I totally called her out. I'm like, don't beat around the bush with me. Just like shoot it to me straight. You want me to get the Foley because you want me to keep dilating. And I'm telling you right now, like I'm not doing it. So, sometimes I try and be tactful.
Hey, no, but
don't do passive aggressive communication, and that depends on your nurse.
yeah, but also sometimes too, you kind of have to, because if
Yeah.
not, if they continue to like pressure and push, that's where a lot of people break. That's where a lot of people are like, oh, okay, I guess. But
Yeah.
sometimes you have to be a little bit more like, no, I don't really care about this and this. I don't want this and I don't need this. It's not an emergency.
Yeah.
We don't need to figure like this is not a do or die situation if we do this right now. And I think that that's important too, that like obviously you don't ever truly want to be rude from the get-go, but sometimes like to get things across to certain people, especially if it's policy or especially if it's just the way they do things and it's, their whatever you call it, their system or whatever.
Yeah.
And somebody comes in and disrupts that. That's where sometimes there can be a lot of pushback by them as well.
Yeah.
So it's important to discuss that stuff with your husband beforehand. If you have a doula, have those things and still be lenient to where like if it's an emergency or something like that where you might have to switch your preferences. But if it's non-emergent and you can wait and it's not that important, like just tell them like, please just stop asking me. The answer is no. Unless only come talk to me if my situation changes to where baby or I are in danger.
Yeah. And that's why it's nice, like that acronym BRAIN, like benefits risk. For example, to like actually apply that with an example, I tested positive for group strep B with my son. And I like, I didn't even know about that because with my first, I tested negative and you can test negative, positive, different pregnancies, which is interesting. And so they were like, so you need to like be on a IV of like penicillin. And I was like, why? And so I said, what are the benefits of that? What's the risk if I don't do that? Is there an alternative? And then like went with my intuition. So The nurse appreciated that, and she went through the benefits. Your child will not get an infection, yada, yada. The risk is that they could get an infection. And, for you, the risk is that, your gut is a little off for a couple of days and you need to eat some yogurt. And the IV is a pain in the butt because it's an IV and sometimes it burns going in type thing. And so, then I was like, okay, can I talk to my husband about it? So I have them leave. And then my intuition was like, I can handle, some yogurt and some burning IV. Like I have a pretty high pain tolerance, so it'll be fine. So I just did it. So, but I could have refused it. So there are certain things that like you 100% can refuse, especially when it comes to like, that's another part of my childbirth education class is like, we talk about what happens to baby, at birth with the eye ointment, vitamin K, circumcision. Like we talk about all those things. And I have my beliefs on it and where I stand and what I do, but I don't present that to you in a way that would make you choose what I would do. I present you with medical-based information, evidence-based information, and that's how you get to make your choices as, parents of that child. And same thing with birth. I present you with evidence-based information on all the things, and you make your choice as a mom and as partners to do what you want to do.
Yeah. And honestly,
Yeah.
that's how it should be. And that really is what
Yeah.
ends up being true informed consent too. And when you have true informed consent and you can weigh out all of the benefits and the risks, you are way more confident in your decisions anyways, moving forward, no matter where you birth, all your decisions. And that's where I think sometimes in the birth world, a lot of moms are basically set up for failure because we don't like, and I am just speaking from the difference between my hospital birth and my home birth. The difference in education is a lot different, at least from my two experiences, that like with my hospital birth, if I would not have educated myself, I probably would not have had as good of an outcome as what I did. Now with my home birth, my midwife, not that she needed to educate me a lot because I already had education from myself that I did with my first, but she was just more like, do you have any questions? And even when I was questioning about like circumcision and the pros and the cons with that, she actually sent me evidence-based articles to read so that there's no bias information. It's either you can just see like, okay, here's risks, benefits, and I can make a good, confident decision based on that. And I have a lot of respect for that because I think that everybody should have that opportunity in every single intervention and thing that happens to you and baby.
Yeah. And that's kind of like with the like when I do teach childbirth education classes or, courses or whatever, it's both sides. So I'm going to give you evidence-based information on, non-medicated pain relief and medicated pain relief, because I always tell people like, you're going to labor before you get the epidural. So like, you need to know how to labor and how to labor without the medical relief until you get the medical relief. Or if you want to just, do it without it.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So it's definitely teaching like both sides of the spectrum.
Yeah. And I think, and that's kind of where we kind of try to come more in this podcast, I guess, too, is just not really one side or the other, just more of like, hey, ask questions and seek actual answers, not just bias on either side, because I think that that's important. And then you're more confident too in your decisions. But so let's go ahead and let's just jump into, as we wrap up here, let's jump into, your birth education stuff that you offer and things with lactation as well. So can you just give us some background on what you do, what you offer, and why it would be so beneficial for especially our first time moms out there?
Yeah, love first time moms. Okay, so I have an Instagram and it's Tiny Toes Birth and Beyond. And I do a lot of stuff there, but I post all my updates there because I don't offer a course. Like I didn't pre-record a course that I just shoot off to you if you digitally download it. I may do that in the future, who knows? But I like doing face-to-face interaction when I'm teaching because I want you to be able to ask me questions. I want to be able to like personalize it more because I feel like you can just find whatever information you need nowadays on the internet, but having like a personal conversation makes it so much more beneficial. So I offer in-person classes and I usually do it quarterly. It kind of just depends on like how many pregnant people I know and how many people have reached out about it. But usually a quarterly class, which will be one day, all day, like one day, 6 hours. Or you can do like private or semi-private, where you do like a couple couples or just you and your husband. And that is broken up into 2 3-hour sessions. And that way you don't have to like commit to a whole day type of thing. And it's either in person in Northeast Ohio or it's online. FaceTime, Zoom, all the things. And that's what I offer for childbirth education. With childbirth education, I talk about pregnancy up until birth. So pregnancy, we walk through some people don't even know what the word effacement means. I didn't when I first got pregnant, and they're like, you're 70% effaced when I was in labor. And I'm like, cool, what does that mean? So we talk about like all things pregnancy and like how to deal with, because so many things come up in pregnancy. Deal with certain pains, or when to know when to alert your doctor, or if this is just like a normal part of pregnancy, around ligament pain, all these different things that you may not know unless you've been pregnant or you have educated yourself by reading books or whatever before you got pregnant. And then also talking about labor and how that can look. So whether it's a home birth, birth center, hospital birth, what it looks like to have non-medical pain relief, medical pain relief, the different interventions that are offered at hospitals. Again, your hospital will prefer certain things, but we go over like all the interventions that can happen. We talk about C-sections, vaginal birth, tearing, like effacement, cervical dilation, like all these things that you probably wouldn't know unless you pursued it. And the reason why I love a class is that there are so many books out there, and I'm a nerd and I like to read. So like for me, I'm down. But like for some people, it can be really overwhelming, to read a bunch of books, read a book on the Bradley method of breathing, read a book on epidurals, you don't have time to read all those books all the time. So having a class where you can, interact with someone and they're teaching you, I feel like, okay, you only have to commit to one day or like 2 nights, and then you're good. You're educated.
Yeah.
And also part of that is like you get a little printout so you can like refer to things. And then we also like create a birth plan in that class. So it's really just an all-in-one, get you equipped and ready.
Awesome.
And then I offer support up until birth. And then once you have the baby, then it kind of switches over to lactation. I'm definitely not a postpartum doula or anything, but sometimes in lactation, I talk to people about postpartum stuff just because I'm a mom and I've been postpartum 3 times.
For sure.
But with lactation, I stress this to people. You are going to give birth, which is going to be beautiful, miraculous, and amazing. With my first, I spent so much time prepping for birth, and I spent no time prepping for lactation. And birth happens like in this amount of time, and then you're feeding your baby for like this amount of time. So it's like you give birth in 24 hours, but you have to feed your child for like a year, or however long even if you're not breastfeeding, you're formula feeding, you're doing something to keep that baby alive for a year before you give them, just straight up food. And I knew after my first and my struggle, I pumped for 7 weeks and finally got that baby latched at 7 weeks. And it's because of lactation consultants, I saw multiple that I got success with that. I knew that I was going to pour way more into like educating myself on lactation instead of like being so hyper obsessed with like birth, where they're both important. But once you give birth and you've been through like a childbirth education course, you kind of understand. You don't need to take that every birth. But lactation is like every baby I have, I always have my friend is a lactation consultant, and she always comes over. And I'm a lactation specialist. So like I know what I'm doing, but I still like her to come over and like watch, see if, latch is good, because it's just always nice to have encouragement and fresh eyes. And so
absolutely.
With lactation, I do offer a breastfeeding class before birth. And then after birth, it's more like a consult. So it's either like in person. Again, if you're in Northeast Ohio, it's in person, where it's definitely like more hands-on, and I'm helping you with latch positioning, your goals. Like, let's say that you want to sleep 6 hours and you want your husband to wake up and give the baby a bottle. Like, what does that look like? Pumping wise and keeping your supply up. And when does your supply regulate? All those questions that you can have that you probably don't think of until you're in it. That's kind of where I step in and help you along with that based off of, evidence medical evidence, and then also through experience too as a mom. So,
I definitely think that birth education is so important. And a lot of times, too, I think that there should still be more than just the hospital birth class, because from experience, and obviously all hospitals are different too. So
totally.
maybe other hospitals do include this, but the one
Mhm.
that was offered for me is, it was not very like in depth. It was just more of like, basically, if you get an epidural, how to manage it. And that was like the extent of it. And I just knew that, like, for myself, I wasn't taking that route. So
Yeah.
it would have been nice to have more of like what you're saying, like just all of the
Yeah.
information, all of the terms, all of that.
Yeah.
And especially with lactation too, because like the course that they have you do and sign in the hospital, to be honest, I want to know how many people actually like listened to that, watched it
Yeah.
fully, and like comprehended that. Because, like, no offense,
Yeah.
I was literally already in newborn bliss, still like on a high after having my child, and I was not paying attention, to be honest. Like,
Yeah.
I was like in and out, but I was like, I don't know. I don't know.
Well, and it was interesting with my first and second, they like pushed the pump a lot at the hospital. And this is like a crunchy hospital. And they were like, you need to start pumping. And I was like, like with my first, of course, I was like, yeah, I need to pump. And then with my second, I'm like, no, like, or I'm bringing baby to breast. Like
Yeah.
this, we're not pumping like for
Yeah.
no reason.
Yeah.
And yeah, with my third, I was like, don't you dare bring a pump in here and leave your lactation consultant out there too.
Yeah. Yeah. And you still have to become an advocate too when it even comes for
Yeah.
breastfeeding. And I just think that that's crazy. And I'm not saying that everyone should do that or that's the only way to do it. But like, I just feel that sometimes moms might give up a lot easier or a lot earlier
Totally.
because they don't have that support right out the gate of a nurse or
Totally.
of someone saying, like, here, like, go ahead, latch. Let's see what it looks like. Let's see what it feels like. Let's see what's happening, to where people aren't really like pushing that. Just like you said, it's like the pump. Like, they want to do that because they're so worried about supply. But I can tell you from
Yeah.
experience that I have exclusively breastfed, and I have not needed to pump because my body produces what my baby needs.
Yeah.
And that personally is my experience. I'm not saying that happens for
Yeah.
everybody, but
Totally.
if I don't know, if you like get on social media, there's like this glorification of like oversupply, and people are always
Yeah. No.
bragging about how much they've pumped and how they can breastfeed. And
Yeah.
then it makes moms feel like if you don't have this freezer stash, you're failing. And I have felt that way before. And then I like look and I'm like, okay, I have a few
Yeah.
bags in the freezer just in case, but like, I exclusively breastfeed. Like, my baby is getting exactly what they need.
Yeah.
And if not, like, there's nothing wrong with supplementing as needed. Even if you don't want to
Yeah.
supplement with formula, there are plenty of people who sell donor milk or
Absolutely.
other options out there too. And yeah,
Well, and it's interesting too because there's like this glorification of oversupply, but people don't realize that at the beginning you do have an oversupply, like everyone does. So and this is like this is what lack of education can lead to. It can lead to mastitis, but it's like
Yeah.
you're telling your body, like the first 12 weeks, your body is learning what your baby needs, just like what you're talking about. So if I'm bringing baby to breast all the time and then I'm pumping, I'm telling my body that I need milk for the baby and then I need like 5 additional ounces. So I'm creating like so much demand for more milk that I am going to have an oversupply and I am going to be like bursting at the seams, leaking all the time and needing to pump. And
Yeah.
if I don't, then you can get mastitis. Like, and it's not to like scare anyone that they're going to get mastitis, but it's like at the beginning, like I always tell people, if you want to exclusively breastfeed, you should not pump after you feed your child. It should be in a replacement of
Yeah.
a feed.
Yeah.
And, there's so many things that go into that. And I also think a generational thing can happen too, where like your parents or like in-laws could like be nice about it, but they could be like your baby's so fussy, like they must not be getting enough. And they're like, they kind of plant that seed of doubt that like you don't have enough and you have an undersupply. And
Yeah.
it is so rare to have an undersupply of breast milk. So rare. And I think people always like listen to other people, or like if their baby is going through a growth spurt or just wanting like extra comfort and to be close to mama, they're like, I don't have enough milk. I'm not making enough milk. So I need to like top this baby off and da, da, da. And it's like, no, just because they're fussy, like babies are so fussy the first 12 weeks. Like they're growing so fast and they're out of the womb. Like it has nothing to do with your breast milk supply.
Yeah. Well, and
It's
then
okay.
the problem with that too, then moms are judging how much milk they're getting based off of what they pump additionally. And then they don't, because you can't, there's no way to actually know how many ounces your baby's getting when you breastfeed. And so then they're pumping and they're getting like 5, 6 ounces each time. So then they're like adding all of that up when they pump and they're like, okay, so look at my baby's probably getting like only 30 ounces, but you just pumped plus breastfed them too. And it's just just breathe a second and and like really, really try to look into like all of that stuff because the comparison game on social media too is buck wild. Just because someone's doing that doesn't mean that that's right or wrong or what you should be doing.
Yeah. And like knowing how to use, so like for example, like I don't only do lactation, like if you need to learn how to use your pump, lots of people will pump and the flange size is completely wrong and they're pumping so inefficiently. So you're like, oh my gosh, I'm only pumping 3 ounces on both sides. And it's like, first of all, that's normal after you breastfeed. That's actually pretty good after you breastfeed. And then also, and I mean good as in like, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And then also like, you don't know how to use your breast pump and that's okay. But that's like what a lactation consultant can do. And what I do as a lactation specialist is like, not only do we just talk about like your feeding goals. So whether that's combo feeding, whether it's exclusively breastfed, whether it's, just formula. I mean, I've had 2 babies that have been on formula for, my first 2, I had them on formula shortly after because I just got pregnant so fast and my supply usually dips out when I get pregnant. And this past baby has been the first one, like I went 6.5 months, like never having a bottle. Like I was just like, why? Why would I waste my time pumping or giving her a bottle? I have 2 toddlers. Like it's easier for me just to breastfeed.
Yeah.
Which I always tell my friends and my clients. At first, breastfeeding will be so hard. Like it'll seem so hard, but you have to tell yourself in the moment, I'm not going to quit today. Like just get through today. But eventually it will be way easier. I am someone who has breastfed, I have combo fed, I have pumped and fed. I have, done straight formula. And I will tell you, being able to just lift up your shirt anytime, anywhere, and feed your baby is so much easier than packing formula and washing bottles. And look, with my first, I was thrilled that my supply dried up when I got pregnant because I was exhausted from trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
So if your mental health is on the line, we're not going to we're not going to damage mom's mental health.
Yeah.
Formula is beautiful and a blessing and we're very thankful for it. But I love helping moms like achieve their goals. And if your goal is to, exclusively breastfeed or maintain any type of breast milk coming in, that's what I hope and help you do.
Yeah. And that's always what I always tell moms too. Like once you get past the first 3 months, then like I feel like breastfeeding normally, at least for me, just feels like a breeze. That first 3 months, that is, you're in the trenches. Yeah. You're in the trenches during that time. Like it can be very hard and tough because it's just demanding. Yeah. It's just demanding. You're trying to regulate whatever. But after that 3 months, it's like easy peasy, at least for me. So how does childbirth education help women to trust both the evidence and their own intuition instead of just like feeling like they have to blindly follow whatever happens or whatever the doctor says they should be doing?
Yeah. Well, I think just knowing like the pros and cons of everything is just going to help you. And you can ask your doctor that and they'll tell you. I mean, I've never had a doctor lie to me, but they'll definitely tell you like what they have learned through their medical training and system. But I think it's just important to know like where you stand on certain things just so you can go in and be confident in your choice. Anytime your choice is going to like seriously affect you or your child, they will tell you. But like when it comes to stuff like, a certain intervention for pain relief or, like stuff that's not high stakes. I mean, I'm not saying that they're like, you go in there and they're like, hey, we need to have a C-section because like baby's heart rate's dropping. It's like, you can't argue that. You got to take care of your baby and you got to take care of you. But when it comes to like other type of interventions or even just like protecting your space from negativity, it's just good to know that like you're in control and you have a say. It was funny you asked about the NICU with my son because my husband and I talked about that and talked about what it looked like. We like looked up the law in Ohio of like signing your child out of the NICU because for us, it was like, we don't want them to like push the NICU stay on us because he was early and there was no actual reason. And so we were like kind of ready to like exercise our right of like taking the kid out of the NICU because we know the most important thing after birth is like for baby to be with mama and like on my skin at all times.
Yeah.
And having a 1-year-old at home, I couldn't really like,
Yeah.
can really do that in the hospital. So yeah, it's just important to know like what you're allowed to follow through with. Now, if it's like life threatening, then they'll get they'll tell you that you have no say in this. We have to treat you as as our patient and save your life or your kid's life at this moment. But it's rarely that. It's usually just interventions and like the speed that they want to move at in a hospital setting. They like to move fast. And especially if you like, I mean, at least in Ohio, but like September is one of the like highest birth rate months. So like in September, I always have like clients that are like, they're just trying to like switch them out real fast, like in, out, in, out, in, out.
Yeah.
And so it's just like advocating for yourself around the holidays. They like to induce, they like to push that. And yeah, so you just have to know that you're in control of your birth space.
Yeah. And one of your biggest messages is that moms are in charge of their birth space. So what does that actually look like in practice?
Yeah. So for me, being in charge of your birth space is, I mean, I would say just like exuding confidence of like being joyful and like happy and excited to like have your baby, a practical way. And this is just like me. And I do not teach this, but this is like my practical way.
Yeah.
I never wear a hospital gown. Like I will not wear a hospital gown. I always come in my cute Kindred Bravely, like my little delivery gown because it's like, no, I'm not a patient that's like sick and needs to be in a hospital gown. Like I am a birthing mother and I'm going to wear this cute little delivery gown and I have all the Velcro you need to access all the things. So I'm very passionate about that. I feel like that kind of sets a tone of like, this is my space, whether it's like dimming the lights, like you have control of the lights, you have control of the scents. If you want your essential oils, if you want a candle, like I mean, I don't know if they'll let you have an open flame, but you can have like the electric candles or, anything that you want in your space you can request. Now, I will say some hospitals don't have like tubs and stuff like that. Some do. And you're in control of that space. So I would say like practical, I would wear your own delivery gown. That's just like my own practical thing. And then also just like owning your space and not being afraid to like, kind of call people higher. I had a nurse one time where it was in my second birth and she said something, oh, the doctor wanted to break my water and I was all about it. I was like, yeah, break my water because then I'll have a baby. And she said, I don't know, that's like petting a cat backwards. And I was like, first of all, thanks for your like little seeded doubt. Second of all, I have dogs. Like, and if I had a cat, they probably would like to get pet backwards. So I don't know what you're trying to say there, but and I just remember being like, I'm about to fire this girl out of my room. And then it was totally the Lord because she went on her lunch break and I had my baby while she was on her lunch break.
Wow. That is awesome.
And I was like, thank you, Jesus, because I was about to fire her.
No, I love that. I love too that you're also a big one when it comes to hiring and firing as you choose because I'm big on that because I don't care where you're at in your pregnancy journey. Somebody does not mesh well with you. Bye. You need a new one?
I have so many friends who are like the doctor just like rubs me the wrong way. And I'm like, get rid of it. Like you can change your doctor up until like I don't even know how close to birth, but like you don't have to be with one doctor your whole prenatal care. And like you 100% can be like, you said something rude and made me feel weird and I'm going to a different doctor. Like you 100% can do that. So I think a lot of people don't understand that like you have total control over like who sees you, touches you, like gets near you.
Yeah.
And that will seriously affect your birth space.
Yeah.
100%.
Perfect. And before we jump into the very last question here, what's the best way for people to contact you if they're wanting to, work with you for their birth education or lactation?
Yeah, Instagram's the best way. Tiny Toes Birth and Beyond is my Instagram. I mean, Lindsay Flume works too. That's my personal, but it all connects you to the same thing.
Perfect.
But I also just have a lot of information that I put on that Instagram.
Yeah.
And that's how I communicate with people. I do have an email, which is the same thing, tinytoesbirthandbeyond@gmail. Again, I'm a stay-at-home mom, and that's my focus. So I don't have like a full-blown website with all these things you can click on and purchase, but that's how you can get in touch with me.
And I'll make sure that I put that in the show notes as well.
Yeah.
So I like to close every single episode with one question, and that is, if you could speak one piece of empowering wisdom into the hearts of the mothers listening, what would that be?
It would be to trust your gut and seek education and have all the babies. And also that brains. That's like my number one thing. Brains. Benefits, risks, alternatives, intuition, nothing, and do it with a smile.
Yes. No, that's so good. And Lindsay, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on Her Birth, Her Story.
Thanks so much for having me.
Wow. Lindsay's stories are so amazing. I love hearing positive hospital experiences, especially ones even with an epidural, that can just be so encouraging to moms who want to take that route. And just knowing that inductions don't have to be so traumatizing all the time. Same with epidurals and same with hospital experiences. I love that she really spoke to how when you make your birth space your own and you advocate for yourself, how you can truly have such a positive experience and a positive outcome. I also really appreciate her speaking to the importance of birth education and how it is so important to seek a lactation specialist before you are in the trenches of no sleep, newborn bliss, and breastfeeding. So if you would like to work with her, because she does work in person in Ohio or obviously virtually as well, in the show notes I have put her Instagram that you can reach out to her with emailing or even through that platform as well. So Lindsay, thank you so much for coming on here and sharing your birth stories and your expertise. We so appreciate it. If this episode inspired you or empowered you in any way, please like, rate, review the show. This helps us to get this episode out to as many moms as we possibly can. And as always, remember that this is your body, your baby, and your birth. We are reclaiming birth one story at a time. I also want to add this disclaimer that this is not to be taken as medical advice. And just remember, these are people's real experiences. These are things that moms have went through. This is their real, raw experience, their own personal convictions, and none of this is to be taken as medical advice. Please make sure that if you are seeking medical advice, then reach out to your own provider so that you can figure out what is best for you.